DesignAware is an internationally acclaimed interdisciplinary design studio based in Hyderabad, India, that aims to create awareness through livable, wearable, accessible, and responsible design. The firm has done so by engaging in seemingly all areas of design, be it architecture, interior design, product design, social work, and such open-ended approach has allowed them to engage well with the community through education and through socially relevant work. I am joined today by not one, but two sisters from DesignAware, Takbir Fatima and Abeer Fatima. So happy to have you. And they come in firsthand to tell us that DesignAware is not just a practice, but it is rather a movement. I thought it is such a beautiful statement in itself and in its goal in bringing people together in this one movement to achieve a single bigger goal. So thanks so much, Takbir and Abir, for joining us today.
Thank you,
Thank you
Karina.
thank you for having us.
It's my pleasure. How did it all start with you and DesignAware?
This is Takbir. I'm an architect and Abeer is an interior designer. So I've always wanted to be an independent practitioner since my undergrad years during my bachelor's in architecture, which I was studying in Hyderabad in India. And then when I was doing my master's at the Architectural Association in London, that's when I kind of started DesignAware as a sort of passion project other than my coursework that was going on. So it was during the one of the winter vacations that I was using the amazing facilities that we had there, which was the digital prototyping lab. And I was alone in the studio during the holidays, and I was making use of the lab to just play around with the laser cutter and the CNC machine. So I started to cut different geometries in plexiglass or fiberglass, and different materials, MDF, fiberglass, and different materials. And then I started to design wearable accessories. And that's where the name sort of came from, DesignAware, because it sounds like designer wear. So yeah. So only later when I moved to Hyderabad, it started to become a firm on its own. So rather than getting a new name, because we already had a website, and it kind of also had this notion of awareness built into it. So design awareness, and that's when I moved to India. That's when I started to work on it as an independent practice, or a design studio. And today it's an interdisciplinary design studio because we wanted to expand our horizons rather than narrowing our focus on one method or niche or discipline. We wanted to design everything from wearables to lighting and furniture to interior spaces to architecture and large-scale urban spaces.
This is Abeer. I'm the lead interior designer at DesignAware. And I joined DesignAware in 2016, and this was my second job after I graduated. So I wanted to be a part of DesignAware, not because it was a firm where the director is my sister. In fact, that was very different for some reason. But really because of the work the firm was doing. Although it was just the beginning of the studio, the team was working on its initial projects. For a person who was on the outside, like I was at that time, I could see how different the work was, and even the process of design at DesignAware was completely different than how other firms in India used to work. So the first project that I was given as soon as I joined the firm was to design the skylight for Hilltop School. I think it was the best start that I could ever ask for as a new member to the team. And the fact that it was built as exactly like I had designed it after many iterations, it gave me the exposure to design as well as execution. So, and it was kind of a reassurance that I ended up making the right decision of joining DesignAware.
Wait, so you were saying earlier that you saw it different than how other firms practice architecture or design. So is it the case where your intent and the actual product were so close together, or that you were able to experience the immediate connection between the two, or how is it different?
It's mainly the process of working. At DesignAware, we work in 3D. Usually, other firms don't think in 3D as much as we do at DesignAware. And we start by making the model. So we know when we're building it, the reason why it's so similar to how we design it is because first we design in 3D, and second we make it ourselves. And so we are able to tell the fabricator as to how each thing fits with the other. So yeah.
We're really focused on fabrication and figuring out how things are made. So if we design anything, it's done using multiple iterations, and we might use many different methods and many different materials to realize what we're designing. So if we design digitally, then in analog or in physical modeling, we try to reverse engineer that and try to make a replica or make a different iteration using physical modeling. And then also when it comes to physical model making or prototyping, we like to do it in many different scales. So we might do it in smaller scales. We might do it in a full scale, like 1:1 prototype of the actual thing, and then we might do a prototype which is in the actual material as well. So that whole process is kind of rigorous, and it's fun for us too, because we were exploring the different materials and different methods.
Nice. Yeah, very nice. I think these days, with the existence of many middlemen and technology, it is easy to be distant from the end product. And I think we are seeing more and more cases like this where the designer is isolated from the making process, right? So I think it's great that you highlight that hands-on approach in your firm to making and to designing. So from the beginning, I've said time to time again that we really appreciate your taking design not in the traditional practice way, but it as a movement, or through is as if looking design through an activism point of view. Can you tell us more about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I set up my firm about 6 years ago. And at the time, I strongly believed that we need to have a certain set of guiding principles that should determine the kind of work that we do and the direction that we take. And also the work that we don't do is very important as well. So similar to the life decisions that we take about what we will and won't do in our lives, we must also be clear about the work that we will or won't do. So today that's become even more relevant because of I think the political climate around us, and also we see a lot of corporates struggling with resolving the kind of cognitive dissonance that comes from delivering good products or services, and yet there are some skeletons in the supply chain or in the way that things are, the place that they're sourced from, or the way the labor is treated or used. So that both of those have to be on the same page. At one point, you're thinking about changing the world and making the world a better place, but at the same time, how you get to that, the end doesn't always justify the means. So the means of getting there, that I think you have to be very intentional about. And also, I think we all have to be focused on where our material comes from. Do we have sustainable resources? How do we, compensate labor or workers? How our decisions or our actions impact people, culture, heritage, the environment, and whether we can stand by the design decisions and what kind of culture we're designing also within the studio. So the kind of culture that we're creating within the studio, the environment, of the sort of family culture that we have within the studio, that also matters quite a lot, the way that we treat each other.
Right.
And also, we were really aiming, when we started DesignAware right at the beginning, we were aiming to make design more accessible, because what we saw at the time was that design seemed to be kind of exclusive and elitist and sort of, exclusionary. And it's sort of excluding a lot of different strata of society. And so we wanted to make design more accessible in every way. It could be affordable, more affordable, relatable, usable. It should be sustainable and accessible to people who have different needs and requirements. So it shouldn't be the privilege of a select few members of society, but it should be within reach of everyone. That was our aim. And it's actually not true that design has to be elitist or it has to be exclusionary. If good design is universally available, it's actually invisible, and that's what makes it even better.
Right. So, with doing many things within design, what do you see to be the recurring topics?
So I think we've outlined certain laws for ourselves, such as not cutting down existing trees or damaging the existing terrain on site, even though it may be more challenging for us to work around. Many times we've fought to be able to stick to these principles. So more than a business, we see that DesignAware is a movement to raise awareness about design and be aware and intentional about our actions.
I think the main issue that we face is with convincing the client or the builder to not cut down trees or to work with the existing terrain of the site. Because, as Takbir said earlier, these are some of the laws that or the rules that we've set up for our firm, and we abide by them no matter how difficult they make our work. We've designed the Hilltop School, where we've stayed strong on the rule of not touching the terrain. I think that we can elaborate on that.
Yeah, that was a very difficult kind of project for us. It was a really challenging project in the sense that it wasn't just about the terrain. It was because the site itself. If I could just explain a little bit about the existing site, it was on top of a hill inside the Kolkanda fort. So the Kolkanda fort in Hyderabad is about 800 years, more than 800 years old, and it's built on a mountain top which is covered with sheetrock. This forms part of the Deccan Plateau region in India, in south central India. So it's covered with sheetrock, which is granite, which is more than 250 million years old. And so, on one hand, we had to sort of preserve the terrain on site, and we had to preserve the rock and not blast any of the rock or break any of the rock, because we were preserving the natural, existing sheetrock or existing sort of natural heritage. But at the same time, we are within the context is within a fort and a settlement which dates back 800 years old. So we had to preserve also the culture and the context, and also, be respectful of the fort where we're inhabiting the fort. So, and plus we have all these existing trees. So this is kind of a recurring sort of, theme where we have to preserve the trees in every project that we get.
We're working on this tiny residential space. It's about 250 square meters in area, which is pretty small. And we have a neem tree right in the middle of the site, which made our work very difficult. But the design that came out of it is beautiful, and it houses the tree. It looks like the tree was designed for the space and for the building itself, but it existed even before the building was designed.
Yeah, so that was, I think in that project, it's really challenging for us to be able to preserve the tree, because a good part of the site is being, sort of taken over by the tree and being shaded by the tree. So the area of the house, the footprint of the house becomes much smaller. But a lot of times it's about the quality of space rather than the quantity. So how much square footage or how much floor area that you're getting may not be as valuable as actually having a tree in the middle of your house, and you're able to get this kind of, you've got nature inside your house, and you've got sunlight coming in through a courtyard in the center of your house, even if it's a small house. That really exponentially improves the quality of life in that house, rather than having a big house which doesn't have a tree in it.
It's like
So
you're getting the outdoors into your house. So you
Right.
have an outdoor existing outdoor space that you're getting into your indoor space.
So design is essentially about problem solving, right? So we were able to carve out this courtyard in this particular project that we are talking about. We're able to carve out a courtyard and then provide ventilation and sunlight through that courtyard. So that kind of solved our problem of ventilation as well as preserving the tree. So it adds value, the tree adds value to the space rather than being an obstacle. And in this process, we were also able to educate our clients about the significance of our design decisions and, advise them about budget and space, allocation. So design is generally so intangible. You can't really see and it's really difficult to measure its quality. And unfortunately, some clients focus more on measuring the floor area and the expenditure. But a larger floor area, as I said, doesn't necessarily mean good design or better quality of space. So, and apart from designing, spaces and designing products, we also organize events and workshops and awareness campaigns. So this comes under our drive towards educating people. So these campaigns shed that necessary light on pressing issues. So recently during the lockdown, back in March and April, we learned that as soon as the lockdown was enforced in India, there are a lot of migrant laborers, migrant workers, day laborers who have left their homes in their native places, which are rural areas, and then they come to work in the city. But they're mostly occupying construction sites, or they're earning money through daily wage work. So as soon as the lockdown hit and all of the construction activity or any other sort of sales activity was stopped, their livelihoods were frozen. And as a result, many of them lost their homes from the construction site. So this really concerned us as an issue. So we decided, we had already started a lecture series online called the Road Less Traveled lecture series, which was conducted via Zoom. And we saw the opportunity initially in getting many different architects and designers from different parts of the world onto one platform. So we had 9 different architects who've taken many different career paths. And so we wanted to bring them all together through a series of virtual lectures so that students and young professionals who are not yet decided about their careers, they would have the opportunity to learn and understand that there are many different kinds of careers rather than a sort of one track, practicing architect narrative that is fed to us in school. So that was the initial aim behind Road Less Traveled. But we also, when we learned about the migrant workers and the issues that they were facing, this sort of became an online fundraising campaign where we were able to, whatever fees we raised during this lecture series, we were able to contribute that towards different organizations, volunteer organizations that were helping migrant workers or people who have been impacted severely by the lockdown, and also some organizations which were working towards providing relief, medical organizations and healthcare workers who are providing relief during the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was our kind of aim to run this campaign. And we've also been running a social media campaign that happens every year called Make Progress Possible, to collect funds for Hilltop School, the charity school that we designed. And we also received donations from all over the world. We also received used children's books for the library itself. So that's a campaign that we run annually.
Yeah. I think all of this really speak about your approach, because the more people join in the movement, the more the word will be spread out there, and the more they'll realize that design is not just one-sided or just for the 1% of the people, but it can be for everyone, of course, in different shape and form.
Yeah, the key word I think is inclusivity or inclusiveness, and trying to get as many people to learn about design and create awareness, and also get many people involved And there are, if we behave as a design studio that it's kind of just providing services, we don't necessarily engage with as many people. But when we start to create a platform or a movement, then the movements usually need some sort of ignition point, or some sort of something that kind of initiates. So we're sort of initiating certain campaigns and certain movements, and then people join in, and they're enthusiastically join in. Because a lot of people were thinking about these issues as well. They just didn't know where to go and how to go about it. So we've had many people joining hands with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that also makes sense, becoming an interdisciplinary practice, because now you'll have many more touch points to get into different kinds of people. So how has the public received it so far?
I think we've had, we post our work on social media a lot. And so we're able to now, as opposed to how things used to be before, um, where people were working kind of in isolation, or people didn't know what was going on behind the scenes in many of the studios. Nowadays, we see that there's a lot of studios and a lot of people who are making a difference, or the kind of work that they're doing, what's the process behind it. You're able to see that because we're showing that on social media. So we are able to get feedback from people all over the world very quickly, and a lot of engagement. So, and we find this to be a really great engine for getting people to participate and act. So, as I said earlier, make progress possible. It started as a way to collect books for the library of the charity school, and that was absolutely necessary for these kids who come from really disadvantaged backgrounds, where they may not have the privilege of higher education, and they may not have access to books at home, because their parents may not be able to afford it, or their parents may not be as educated. So they had to have a library. So this movement, Make Progress Possible, grew into something much bigger than what we'd imagined. And we received donations from all over the world for, not just for the books, but also sports equipment, midday meals, and, uniforms and funding and so many things. And not just us, but many people whom we know only online. We don't really know these people. They've taken this cause to heart, and that is truly quite inspiring for us.
Sometimes all people need, especially for such charity campaigns, is a push. So you just need to show them that this is the way and this is the path, and we are walking on this path, and you are free to join. And that's how we get a lot of donations and a lot of contribution from people. They know that we are doing this personally, and they trust us with our campaign, and that's how they're able to join us.
Yeah, I really like that using of social media, because, well, in the perfect world, these people you interact with in social media would be your end users of the space or the product you create, right? So in a way, you get direct feedback from them. Yeah, because what makes a design successful is not how good looking it is or anything like that, although a lot of times it may look that way. But it is about the people's opinion. It is the people who use it who determine if it's successful or not. So I think it is great that you are doing that. I think we ought to see more social media or more interaction presence in the future.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, we also try to, like you said, the users who will be one day probably using the space are giving us feedback about how we should do it. So even the school that we designed, it was really inclusive. The process that we adopted for that was really inclusive, in that we included views and opinions of the teachers and the students, and they also participated in the design process in some ways. Some of the parts that we didn't design ourselves, we left them kind of open to interpretation. The users or the students and the teachers took over those spaces, and they completed the design, just following our sort of design language that we gave them. And also on social media, we run a lot of polls sometimes in, what kind of, we have a couple of different solutions that we can decide between and then contribute their opinion to it. And yeah, I think it's really important to have that inclusiveness. We also had a lot of open source designs that are just available for download, and then people can just build them themselves. So we have these little designs that we do that are just posted free of cost, and they can just download and use them in their daily lives as well.
Hmm. Then in real life, how has engaging in different fields enhance and complement your practice?
When we design products as a series. So every product has a line of its own. The series, well, we don't do one type of product in a series. A series would contain a piece of furniture or a piece of jewelry and a lifestyle accessory. It would be a combination of several different fields of design. So the products could either be related to each other in terms of material used to make them, or the process of fabrication, or the process in which we design it, or it could also be a combination of all three. Although there is always an overlap between the things that we design. For example, we use laser cut LED fiberglass to design wearables. Then we use the same technique to design a lighting as well as a built space, a built kiosk for a business center in Rajiv Gandhi International Airport in Hyderabad. Then another example is a series that we did in bent metal rods. We designed a lifestyle accessory called Angular, and then we did a side table, a base of a side table called recursive side table, and then we scaled it up a bit and we did a huge feature wall in the ice cream parlor that we designed. So it's the same method and sometimes the same material or the same process of design, but then it's different series, it's different products, but in the same line.
So it's kind of a series, and you see the same kind of language happening, but it's manifesting itself in different forms.
I see. Yeah, no, I get that repetition can act as a powerful reminder. So, last but not least, through this movement, how do you wish people to see design now?
I think traditionally, the idea of practicing architecture was seen as a solo pursuit, and I've been trying to move away from this perception. Even through the Road Less Traveled series, we try to raise awareness about the fact that there are so many different ways of being an architect. So the idea was, it was like a romanticized idea of an architect who was like an elite master designer who's working on skyscrapers, or really large gestural kind of designs which are really form driven and known as a starchitect. So that's obviously a valid way of being an architect. That could be one direction to take, and that's just one way of looking at architecture, though. So it's one way, but it's not the only way. And even that way isn't entirely what it seems, because behind that persona or the face of the architect is actually a team, a whole support system of architects and designers and engineers who help make their dreams a reality. So I strongly believe in collaborations and connections, and that many hands and many minds coming together to create a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. So design firms, we believe they should start working like startups, which is how we've been positioning ourselves. But startups, with clearly defined goals and principles. So architecture can't be practiced in a vacuum. There's no tabula rasa. So it's always in correlation to other factors, existing conditions, context, constraints, and then history or precedent. So whatever mark we make is in addition to the marks that exist already. So whatever were made by others before us. So we stand on the shoulders of giants to reach where we are today.
Yeah, I do agree. I think in the startup world also, it is about nurturing an ecosystem rather than like one single company, right? So, in conclusion, I think this conversation really highlights that designers are very much equipped with certain ways or certain techniques to infuse a certain language or symbolism to kind of reach goals more effectively. But we also need to understand that it is not one person succeeding alone, but rather it is everyone succeeding together.
Right. I totally agree with that. I think there's no point of one or two people kind of moving forward. It's
Yeah.
about moving together as a movement.
Well, I cannot end it better myself. So thank you so much, Takbir and Abeer, for your time. We really, really appreciate your being here today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. It
Thanks,
was really
Karina.
nice talking to you.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you too.